And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Feeling like Michael Bublé in the house. It is a new dawn. It is a new day, and we are feeling good. Welcome to this week's episode of Toronto Till I Die. Your host, Mike Newell, as always, with Michael Singh, and a person that a lot of you know really well now, my co-host on the Tunnel Club, Sean Levy, has joined us this week. Guys, what a game. I mean, for all the sort of humming and hawing and hand wringing that a lot of us were doing, me included, I'll put my hand up about that. Man, they shut us up real quick with an amazing result at BMO Field. Sean and I talked about it in Tunnel Club. We weren't able to go, but Mike, you were there. Just what was your weekend like, especially following that performance?
Yeah. Okay, first off, Mike, can we talk about that intro for a sec? Buddy, big show, you're bringing the heat. I like it. I
mean? I got to get the Bublé content in here. I'm wearing a Jamaica shirt, so I had to get some kind of Canadian content in there somehow.
I mean, yeah, there's all Italian content over the weekend for TFC, but, leading up to the match, a lot of people shared this sentiment with me. It's been a long time where we haven't been able to wait and be excited for a TFC match that was upcoming. And that was just the sentiment. Like the whole day, people were like, can we just go to the game already? Can the game just start already? Because that's how excited everybody was. And obviously the atmosphere and everything just, typically I like to arrive at TFC games about an hour before the match. But I decided to make it 2 hours on Saturday, just because I knew it would be special.
You want to take in the vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And I was also one of those people who were like, "Can this game start already? Like, come on!" So I went in, and man, before gates even opened, there were long stretches of lineups outside BMO Field, like I haven't seen in a very long time. I'm not sure that's been the case all season, where you arrive over 2 hours before a match and before gates are even open and people are lining up outside the gate. So that set the tone for kind of what was to come on the evening. And even before Jonathan Osorio scored the goal in the 4th minute, I was ready to tweet out like, man, there's something special happening at BMO Field. And yeah, obviously, as we'll dive into shortly, lived up to expectations and then some.
Yeah, I think it did. Sean, I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the Tunnel Club, but even from sitting at home and watching on television, you kind of felt that vibe from the TV, right? Like you kind of, it sounded like a big game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had a packed house. You had everybody engaged. Everybody, and I mean, you had the hype from the signings. Everybody have been anticipating, first of all, Insigne for a while now. So when you add Bernardeschi in that conversation, it's like finally we get to see the hype that we've known for months come to fruition in front of our eyes. And that's I think what added to the excitement. And I mean, that first half couldn't have played out, I don't think, any better than any of us could have asked for or written, right?
No.
It was the perfect result, the perfect atmosphere. I mean, BMO has been alive and electric many, many times before. It's not like this was a one-off or anything. So we've witnessed, probably even bigger moments than that. But the vibe, the feel, we haven't felt that way in a long time. And that's the difference. I think, you and I, we were there most of last season. Mike, I know you were there, and it was tough sometimes just sitting there and feeling there was just a negative vibe and negative aura about when you were there last year. That's gone. you could see, you could feel it. Like I said, we weren't there, but I could still, like, I was more pissed that I wasn't able to actually feel it live. Just, like I said, the passion that was coming off of my TV screen was real.
Absolutely. And
Just
and
a little anecdote, Mike, just to kind of feed off what Sean was saying. We talked about this a lot through the first half of the year, before the games even started, when the announcers would go around saying the names, like the first name, and then letting the crowd say the last name. And then when you get to a guy like Kosi Thompson or Luca Petrasso, the fans go silent because they don't know who those players are. When Lorenzo Insigne's name was announced, the stadium shook. Literally, the stadium shook because everyone said his name so loud. So that just, a perfect anecdote to kind of summarize the first half of the season versus where we are right now.
In a lot of ways, you can kind of parallel it to this game in terms of the first half of this game and the second half of this game. We'll get to that in a second. We're going to go a little bit deeper into sort of the BMO atmosphere chat a little later in the podcast as well. Of course, we'll have the Michael Singh notebook, and we'll bring up a few things. And of course, we have our 3 burning questions. So thank you to all the listeners who submitted questions this week. We've got a few bangers in there. That's going to be awesome. For those who are watching live, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, if you're able to leave comments, if you were at BMO Field on Saturday, just leave a comment. Just tell us what you were feeling throughout the game and sort of your lead up to the game. And then obviously watching that first half. I'd love to get some comments, and if we can get them on the screen, we'll try to do that throughout the show. But normally we wouldn't necessarily go deep diving into the game. That usually gets done on the Tunnel Club post-game reaction show. But I don't think we can really go through at least the first part of the show without talking about it. Because like you said, Mike, the mood from the first half of the season to this game, night and day. And I think obviously when you inject the amount of talent that just those 2 players, Insigne and Bernardeschi, bring, along with bringing in a Marc-Anthony Kaye, along with adding a Domenico Criscito, who I think could have been a potential for man of the match in 2 different ways, in 2 different, very distinct halves. I mean, the new era couldn't have started off with a bigger bang, could it?
No, it couldn't, as we kind of touched on, like, kind of went perfectly the way that TFC would have wanted. I think starting both of those guys, Insigne and Bernardeschi, the hope was maybe they can go up 1-0, 2-0. I don't think anyone was really expecting them to go up 4-0 in the first 45, and it actually played out perfectly that Bob Bradley didn't have to play them longer in that game, looking ahead to tomorrow's, obviously, Cup final. So, yeah, in so many different ways, it played out perfectly. I think it's really important to emphasize that it really did reignite sort of the buzz in the city. Obviously, there was a buzz leading up to the game, but as you mentioned, man, lived up to expectations and then some. I think that's really important for this team moving forward, because you had the Insigne Bernardeschi. I was listening to the Jays game yesterday. I just on the radio as I was driving home, and they were talking about the Insigne Bernardeschi moment from last, like this moment, what just happened. It caught the buzz of not just us, obviously, as diehards, but bigger than us. The casual fans are now talking about Toronto FC, which I think is just so huge for this team after what they've been through the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And Sean, again, we kind of, when we bring it onto the pitch and we're looking at, the players that came out and performed, it felt like those 2 players alone just raised the caliber of everybody else. As much as they were stars of the show in a way, it's like they were able to raise everybody else's game as well.
Oh yeah, you could see it. Everybody, I mean, there was a hunger from everyone, and especially, I mean, again, first half, second half, basically two different games. But you could see, like, I saw Kosi turn the ball over. He fought to win it back and not just kind of like shrug his head and like kind of just hustle back on defense. It was Marc-Anthony Kaye always wanting to just be a presence. We know a healthy, motivated Osorio is always probably our best player prior to having, the type of talent we have now on the pitch. Like Bono, outstanding. McNaughton out. Like, you can name every single player who we've had an issue, who we've complained about, who we've said whatever all season long, they all gave it 110% yesterday. And that was some, or sorry, on Saturday, that was something I think we haven't seen. And you're right. The type of talent that you bring in will definitely, well, hopefully that's always what you want. You want them to elevate everyone else. You want everyone to build, to kind of want to prove that I can play along these type of players.
Yeah, and if you break down even the first goal, right? Like, okay, sure, it was off the Oso's backside and goes into the net, right? Okay, that's a lucky bounce, but those lucky bounces just weren't happening for the team in the early part of the year, right? Like those plays that would happen in the early part of the year, the first part of the year, they go out of bounds. It somehow strikes his hand and he's called for a handball in the box. Like those kind of weird things that would sometimes just elevate you and get you going weren't happening. And you can feel both from the energy of the crowd, but that energy flowed into the players and they were just on it from kickoff, right from kickoff. You could see that they were on it. And to get that goal early, it felt like it settled everybody down a little bit. And then they were able to be like, okay, now we can show out. Now we can play some football and pass the ball around and really show what we're about. And there was probably a 10-minute stretch, maybe a little less, but I'll just say a 10-minute stretch after the first goal where, the TFC looked like they were going to run them and maybe put 3 or 4 by them, within the first, say, 20 minutes. Like that's how dominant they were in let's just say that first 20 minutes.
Yeah, Bernardeschi missed his chance, right?
Yeah.
He was on the penalty spot and put that shot just wide, just quickly. All 4 of the goals TFC scored. I know Ozo's obviously went in off his backside essentially, but all 4 of the goals that TFC scored, if you look at the build-up play on that Osorio goal, was beautiful.
Yeah.
The Michael Bradley header, that was, I think it gets overlooked because his second goal was so nice, but that was a tough finish.
Yes.
You're ahead of the near post, and yet you're able to angle your head to put that back post with the pace on the ball. Like that was such a good finish. And then obviously Bernardeschi's sweet strike, and then Michael topping it off with one of his best ever in a TFC shirt, I'd say. So yeah, all 4 of those goals were quality football goals. And you talk about elevating to the rest of the squad. Well, it's not even like guys step their game up. It was more so that the guys had less to do and they could just focus on the simple plays. Like I saw a lot of praise after the game for Lucas McNaughton. How much defending was Lucas McNaughton really asked to do in over the course of the match? I bet you if you look at the rest of the season, it's way less compared to the rest of the season. So yeah, just how much they're elevating the game, that part's or making it easier for TFC's players. That part's exciting.
Absolutely. I think, when you you take a player like Lucas McNaughton or Shane O'Neill right before he went out, right? Like I think those are 2 players that I think don't necessarily, they're not putting butts in seats. They're not necessarily going to erase the pulses of TFC supporters when you talk about them. But if, like we said yesterday, right? Like if they can be players that you can rely on to do a solid job, they don't need to be spectacular, right? They can do the simple stuff, be able to mark their mark, right? And be able to intercept balls and play when they're in possession, can play, simple balls and to get midfielders going and moving and getting things going. That is that's going to be kind of a night and day difference with this team. Whereas prior, they're covering holes from players that are out of position, or they're, the ball's getting turned over really easily and they're getting exposed a lot and they're having to run with their backs to go, like that kind of defending puts a lot of stress on a back line. And I think just being able to hold the ball, give it to an Insigne or give it to a Bernardeschi or give it to a Marc-Anthony Kaye and know that they're going to be safe with that ball, I think does wonders for a defensive core. And obviously you see it. It's the first clean sheet in almost a year in league play. And really at no point, even in the second half, And we could talk a little bit about that, sort of the substitutions of the internationals out, and sort of bringing the young kids into Neil in. I still didn't really think Charlotte were going to necessarily score. I thought they had more of the ball. I didn't necessarily think, though, that I never got that feeling like, oh my God, they're going to concede. They didn't look like a house of cards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. And I see a lot of people criticizing what TFC looked like in the second half. I mean, criticizing TFC's depth, let's say. That's what a second team should look like. And that's kind of what I saw on the pitch after the second half, aside from maybe the Ozo, Bradley, Crescito that was on the pitch. I mean, they come into a game where you're 4-0 up. Like, it's tough to really bring that same level of intensity and match the same level of intensity in the first half when you're obviously taking off the qualities of Bernardeschi and Insigne. And yeah, I thought they did fine. I'd like to see what the depth pieces look like. If, I saw Ivan here already going at Ayo. I'd love to see what Ayo Akinola looks like on the pitch next to Insigne and Bernardeschi and Mark Anthony Kay and Bradley and Oso. Like, I'd love to see how that kind of works out, because I think, a lot of people are taking the initiative, I guess, to kind of chirp some of these guys, but
you might see Ayo tomorrow.
Yeah.
You might see him up top tomorrow. You have a Canadian CanCon rule for the Cup final, right? So we don't know what the status of Mark Anthony Kay is. So you might end up seeing Ayo up top tomorrow.
Well, you can almost guarantee you'll get, Jonathan most likely healthy, as long as he's healthy. And then, like you said, with Mark coming off early, that would probably be the question mark where you would most likely then want to give Ayo a start versus Ayo or Kerr. I mean, I think you would go with Ayo if you're going with a similar 11 to Saturday's match, and where you're just swapping out position for position. But, you'll probably see, if not both, at least one of them in on for tomorrow night's game.
I guess my question for people that are criticizing the second half, and I get it. Like, it's not like I don't understand why people kind of look at that first half and go, wow, look at that second half and go, ugh. But again, you take out the two. This was the argument just, I think, like a week and a half ago after the loss, I think, in Chicago. We had no DPs on the field, and we lost that game. And everybody was kind of complaining and saying, well, we didn't have any DPs. What did you expect? Well, there were no DPs on the field in the second half. So kind of the same question is, what do you kind of expect? In fact, what I saw was a defensive market team, in terms of team defending, an improvement in how the team defended as a unit in the second half. The mission was clear. Keep a clean sheet, right? Like, if you got an opportunity to counter, then you have Pace and Kerr and Nelson to get at them. And eventually when Ayo came on, that's another piece you have there. But if you're up 4-0 at halftime and you take off, you have the luxury to take your DPs off to get ready for a cup final. The instruction of those guys are, look, just don't concede, right?
Yeah.
Dig in and don't concede. And that's exactly what they did.
Don't concede, no mistakes, no stupid fouls, and
almost got one.
And let's close it out. And I think you're right. The problem is the hype from the first half was like way up here, and then when you're not getting that same offensive attack the second half, which is again understandable. That's kind of where everyone's like, oh, look at, I mean, it wasn't pretty to watch. We all were witnessing the same things. It wasn't, especially when you saw what you saw in the first half. But you're right. The key is we didn't concede. We held on, or at least we closed out the way you want a team to be able to close out, especially based on how we've done previously, where we probably would have conceded if we didn't have such a big lead. If we weren't playing that team. Everyone, make sure they do their part defensively.
Yeah, and also, like, Insigne and Bernardeschi are on this team now. Like, it's not going to be very often where we see them, hopefully, not on the pitch, or at least one of them on the pitch with this TFC team. There's also And TFC will be the first to tell you this. Bob Bradley will be the first to tell you this. There is still work that needs to be done with this roster. A lot of work that needs to be done with this roster. You think about the core pieces that this team has brought in, there's more to add to that core. And that's going to come, maybe by the end of this transfer window, we'll see another piece come in. But there's also going to be work done in the offseason, a lot of work done when you have some of the guys that are coming off the books. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, Mike, with with that one foul. But I need to compliment Daniil Henry, because what he brings to TFC is a no nonsense type of defending type of guy, and he brings so much toughness and leadership and his veteran presence to this team. Like I was watching him that second half, and he was talking to his back line non-stop. And that's something this team has been lacking for the entire season, is that leader at the back. And when he's on the pitch, he's capable of being that guy, especially when paired up next to a Lucas McNaughton. The tackle that he made, from my vantage point, I thought it was a fantastic tackle, just from my vantage point. And I understand why people are like, especially based on his reputation, are concerned with tackles like that. But in a 4-0 game, I like that, because if the guy gets a touch on the ball, there is a chance that he could break through there. Just based on, I guess my angle. I think the replay maybe showed that space was a little bit tighter than what it was, but
I don't think it was definitive. Like, VAR took a look at it. I know the referee didn't go to the monitor, but VAR looked at it, and there wasn't enough, in my opinion, to say there was a clear and obvious error. Right? Like,
I thought it was a good tackle.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
I understand.
It was a hard tackle, and I think that's people are still living into like what the Daniil we've seen in the past, right? But it was kind of what you want. You want him to clap your man down right in front of the top of the box and make him realize, like, if you're coming in here, this is what you're going to get every time. And a striker will more hesitate, versus wanting to take a hard foul like that.
For sure. And he also, again, I think he won the ball. Like, I think he definitely won the ball there. And he made a couple of crucial defensive clearances as well. Like, and the one thing I'm happy that I thought of this again. The one thing I love this about him, when Jaden Nelson was brought down and Mark Anthony Kaye got a little bit heated, who was in there in that scrum as well, cooling everybody down, but at the same time backing his teammates up? It's Daniil Henry. And you guys know how big Daniil Henry is and how intimidating Daniil Henry is. Like, adding that presence to your team makes TFC tougher to play against. And when you're playing a bunch of kids, and even the Italian guys, having someone like that even just on your bench that is beside you, that can back you up, and when a game gets a little bit heated, a little bit heavy, like that's so important, especially with such a young group of guys. And as Bob Bradley kind of touched on after the game, it's not like bringing in Daniil stops them from doing other things. So the more that I talk about it, it's a no-brainer, a great addition to the squad, and I hope that he continues to see minutes on this team.
Yeah, the great depth piece that can give you minutes. Motivated player, wants to get in a World Cup squad, right? So I think this is a no-lose, low-risk situation. In the end of the day, he may end up being a piece that you keep going into 2023 if things work out, right? So if anything, it's kind of like an extended trial with very low risk. And that's kind of how I see it. I don't know how you see it, Sean.
No, I mean, I've said it since they signed him. It's a good depth signing. He's not the savior on our defense, but it's a good piece. We need another center back. Going into that game, we had 2 healthy center backs, right, prior to signing him. So now technically we have 4, So hopefully we get Mavinga back, and it's just, again, an added rotation piece that you can rest, because you don't want to be riding 2 guys every game, week in, week out. Just can't happen.
So quickly, where does Daniil rank for you guys on TFC's depth chart at center back right now?
That's a hard
me too right now, given that Chris Mavinga's not playing. All right, like we can't. It's hard for me to to say I'm just going on who's available right now. When Chris Mavinga is back, that obviously changes. But right now, it's Shane O'Neill. I would say Daniil and then Lucas. If you swap Lucas and Daniil in spots at the current moment, I wouldn't have too many arguments. But at the same time, from all the things that you talked about, Michael, in terms of what he brings to the team, I think he just has that little edge. Even if, yes, you're going to have to live with him being Daniil, right? And Chucky Lozanoing a guy a few times, right? Like that's gonna, that's gonna happen. And I think for us who have been watching Daniil since literally he was a stick and a child, right? Because like when he came to this team, he was 18, maybe 17.
17.
When he first signed with the team in 2010, like he's always been that way. And that is the Daniil that in a lot of ways we love, but we also understand that, yeah, sometimes he's going to go in there and he's going to take a guy out and it's not always going to be pretty.
Yeah. And I think that,
go ahead,
sorry.
John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's probably the best way to say is that we haven't really seen a healthy, motivated Mavinga in a while. And I think at the moment, you kind of can't really we know he's part of the picture for the rest of the season, but he just hasn't.
To what
been,
extent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for now, you have to say O'Neill. Like we need a healthy O'Neill. If we like, for me, that's more the bigger concern is can we have a healthy O'Neill for the remainder of the season? But it's O'Neill, Henry, just based on his his experience, and I've been impressed with what McNaughton has brought to the table so far this season.
Yeah, McNaughton's been solid. I think there's been some defensive lapses especially during the first part of the year. Obviously, his first year in MLS, so that's expected. I think he's really good with the ball at his feet. Well, really good is relative to basically the rest of the TFC's back line, but he's good with the ball at his feet. He's confident, has a little bit of that toughness. Daniil's like a Shane O'Neill to me, where he's just a no-nonsense type of guy, type of defender. You know what you're getting out of him kind of game in, game out. Is he prone to some of those lapses? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's who, as you said, Mike, that's who Daniil Henry is. But at the same time, he's also a guy who has a lot more than 100 MLS appearances. He's got about 50 caps for Canada. He's been there, done that for a lot of different teams around the world. And where I would rank him on TFC's depth chart, I would say right below Shane O'Neill. I think Shane O'Neill has definitely been Toronto FC's best and most consistent defender this season. I think that's a no-brainer in my opinion with Shane O'Neill, because he's a guy you know exactly what you're gonna get, and he brought that little bit of edginess and toughness when TFC lacked it a lot this season. So he actually went down. It looked like someone landed on his head. I believe
it was.
It
kind of came. Yeah, it was challenging, and he kind of got a little bit of I think either like a knee to the back of the head or a forearm to the back of the head.
Yeah, when they were kind of falling over each other, and he got the rough end of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see kind of what his status is. I think Alex Bono after the game, he said he hopes that he's not too hurt. And he could bounce back quickly, but that's definitely something you got to keep an eye on, because he's so important to this TFC backline. And yeah, fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Let's talk about another player that's really important to the TFC backline. Let's just talk about like how good is Domenico Criscito, right? Like how I think sometimes with obviously you have Bernardeschi and Insigne, who we're going to talk about in a second, but he kind of may get lost in the shuffle just because, again, he's a left back. It's not the sexiest position unless you're Alphonso Davies, right? So, but the balls he was in the first half, it was about his ability to connect with Insigne, which is a promising sort of connection on that left-hand side. But some of the balls he was playing in either deep or crossing into the box were just absolutely exquisite. And obviously Jimenez was called offside on that one goal, but the ball from Criscito was just inch perfect. And, if there are going to be more times than not then that Jimenez will be onside on those chances, or Ayo is going to be onside on those chances, and they're in on goal, right? And that's just going to create so many more opportunities for this team to score goals.
Yeah, I think I said this a couple shows back when I think after his debut, his quality, I would say, is probably, aside from Insigne and Bernardeschi now, probably is the most quality on the pitch. And we talked about his first touch, best first touch on the field aside from Insigne and Bernardeschi now. And what I really liked about his game is he wasn't like, obviously you line him on the left-hand side beside Insigne and you expect those guys to link up. He wasn't afraid to not play in his Insigne. Like Insigne drew his defender to the line, and there's so many times he saw the ball play through that channel in between the center back and their right back, who was stepping high because everybody was expecting the ball to go to Insigne. We saw that so many times. So yeah, I think that part's great. Little slightly disappointed not to see him taking corners anymore, because he just has that quality with his deliveries. But when you got Insigne there on the right, it's tough to, and Bernardeschi, of course, it's tough to tough to argue that decision. So he's so good, Mike, and I'm disappointed that he's only going to be here for like a year and a half.
Yeah, and the thing is, defensively, in that second half, the really awesome thing that I was able to step into things a lot. And look, again, it's kind of hard to either Petrasso or Schaffelberg, both are, again, learning on the job in a way. Okay. Sure, you can have your opinion there, Tinder. But yeah, I think that, he could step into things, and do it in such a smart way, be able to position himself in a way that he wasn't going to get beat. Because look, he's not always going to beat guys for pace. That's not his game. But his smarts in terms of where to be and anticipating play is something that back line desperately needed, especially on that left-hand side.
Yeah, it's a calming veteran presence that, like, his IQ is it's impressive watching a back line that actually you're not worried about game in, game out, right? Now that you have, I mean, if again, nothing to knock Kosi. Kosi's done an admirable job for somebody who's never played that role before. But if you can actually now add a right back who's, a little bit more of a veteran right back to go to play alongside, you can only, somebody who can also do the same thing that we see Criscito do, because I didn't think he had that kind of pace. I was seeing him move yesterday, and I'm like this guy's 35 years old, and he's got pace. Like, I expected him to struggle a little bit in MLS, and he hasn't looked out of place at all when it comes to that. So he's helped, I think, just strengthen the confidence level when you have such a young back line. At least, compared to what we've had prior.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the two big signings in a bit more detail here, in both Insigne and Bernardeschi. I'll start with Lorenzo. Obviously, Michael, you talked about his entrance when they call his name as they announced the 11 at the stadium. The stadium shook. On TV, it came through too. Every time he touched the ball, there was like a collective gasp of, what's he going to do? It's like and it goes back to, obviously, the comparisons to Giovinco are just going to always be there, fairly or not. But it's the same kind of thing. He gets the ball at feet, and people are just like, magic could happen any moment. And look, he did not disappoint for a guy who was in a calf injury and hasn't played since the middle of May. He did not disappoint. Looked sharp. Maybe not as sharp as he would be when he's fully match fit, but for a guy, again, who hasn't played a competitive match in over 2 months, looked pretty sharp. And then you can also see the decision making, right? Like the ability to draw defenders and play either Criscito or Marc-Anthony Kaye into space, or Osorio into space for that matter, was fantastic. And then, of course, the back heel for the Bradley goal, the assist there was chef kiss.
Yeah, his quality shows the first time he touches the ball. And I keep thinking back to that play where Bernardeschi was on the right and he crossed that ball into the middle into Lorenzo. So they went Bernardeschi straight to Lorenzo, straight diagonal across the field. And I'm like, finally, like something like to be able to pick out a pass like that and bring it under control to the fact that you can take on your defender 1v1. I think he lost the ball after that. That was actually the chance that led to Bernardeschi's shot at the top of the box and went just wide. But yeah, he's kind of came as advertised. The one thing I'll kind of want to temper expectations a little bit is I don't think he's really, maybe you might see it a couple of times, a handful of times this season, but he's not the type of guy to take 2, 3, 4 defenders on at once. He'll typically beat a guy and then, as you kind of alluded to, bring his teammates into the play, which is a lot different than we've seen from other players of his profile come into Major League Soccer. Obviously, with Sebastian Giovinco, I mean, come on, Giovinco's slalom runs, that was some of the most exciting things for TFC fans. But with Insigne, he makes his teammates around him better. The angles that he plays his passes at, those are the types of angles that literally penetrates a defense and gets you going on the attack. But it's going to require everyone to kind of get on the same page. And we saw it. I mean, at a certain point during that game, we saw teams or players on TFC all doing like a bunch of back heel flicks. I think we saw that from like the jump, because I feel like they now have players that they can do that alongside. I mean, at one point, I think we saw Daniil Henry do it back to Alex Bono, and then I'm like, okay, like
everybody just everybody's feeling themselves tonight,
Yeah, exactly. Everyone was feeling themselves during that game, but that's kind of what he brings, and more than that, from what I've heard, and this isn't just Insigne, it's the Italians. They've demanded more out of their teammates in training sessions. They want more. They expect more. It's not just Bob Bradley anymore who's expecting more to their guys. So if someone makes like a stray pass, they'll say, "Hey, give it back to them, pass it again," or like they'll at least comment about it. So yeah, we talked about a little bit what their presence can mean to this team, and I think we're starting to see that rub off on the whole squad.
Absolutely. And then the golden haired one of Bernardeschi, goal and an assist. Hey, his cross looked great even if he slipped. It's funny because there was a comment that he was actually trying to probably go a little deeper on the cross and not necessarily go near post, but it looked like a rehearsed set play. Not dissimilar to Giovinco de Altidore in the 2016 playoffs against Montreal. Kind of the same idea, that sort of near post flicked header. And you mentioned, Michael, just the level of difficulty from Michael Bradley to get that ball on goal, let alone where he ended up getting it in the back of the net was incredible. But I want to talk a little bit just about Bernardeschi in terms of his. We know he's got that left foot and he's going to come in, but I felt in a lot of ways he almost played more centrally at times than he was a winger. And I wonder if that is more of a indication of how Bob Bradley wants to use Bernardeschi, or if it was just a first game and he was trying to find space in the ball and that's what presented to him.
I think that's just soccer. Like, yeah, okay. Guys are going to be lining up on the right wing, which he was for the majority of the match. But yeah, there are going to be times where you drift inside. I think that just, when you have a really good team, you can kind of create that understanding with your midfielders. And we saw it already with Lorenzo, actually, too. Lorenzo cut inside a bunch, dropped inside, and Ozo went out on the left wing and took his spot. We still see a standard of 4-3-3 out of this team. But yeah, there will be moments in the match where Bernardeschi feels like there's more space inside where he can create something and get a shot off, like he did during Mark Anthony Kaye's goal. Like, you look at some of the guys' runs, and he's such a smart player, and that's what kind of goes unnoticed, is sort of his movement off the ball too. When he pinged that pass to Lorenzo, he actually got, after he missed his chance, he actually got mad at Lorenzo for not finding him at the top of the box. And I rewatched that play. I'm like, the run that he made was special. And if Lorenzo actually got his head up and probably found Bernardeschi, he would have had a shot. I mean, he got a clear-cut chance anyways, but he would have had a shot that was intentional and a chance that was created that was intentional. So I love that part about his play. These guys play with a lot more structure than, when Pozuelo was on the right-hand side. And yeah, let's also not forget that Bernardeschi was also used as a central midfielder at times when he played for Juventus. So he is capable of kind of sliding inside, like you said, Mike. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of that more from Bernardeschi, but he's more so a right winger naturally than probably a central midfielder.
Absolutely. And just to wrap up sort of just the review on this game, Michael Bradley brace. Who saw that coming? Who had that on the bingo card for this game? Two DPs make their debuts in Star, and it's Michael Bradley, the captain, getting a brace and two really great goals. We already talked about the header. Let's talk a little bit about the fourth and final goal there just before halftime. We talked about the flick from Insigne, but has Michael Bradley scored a better goal for Toronto FC ever? I would say no. In terms of, okay, he does get through it. He gets a little bit fortuitous getting through some of the defenders. But I mean, when he got through, I thought, yeah, he probably did say that. He probably said that at dinner the night before in Italian. Yeah, in Italian. But as he got through, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to do the Michael Bradley thing. He's going to try to side foot this. But then the delicate chip, a great finish, just an absolutely great finish.
Oh, it was smart. Like it was. I mean, when I saw him, what looked like dribbling around two or three defenders, I'm like, wait, this is not Mike. This is like, where has this Michael Bradley been? Like he's not usually that kind of attacking offensive midfielder, and all of a sudden we see him be like, yeah, and then the finish was a smart, perfect finish. It was, again, experience. It wasn't about like, oh my god, I'm right on net, let me just hammer it. It was like knowing how to just chip it perfectly, placement. Like, what more can you say? It was a well taken, well finished goal.
Papa Bradley was happy. You could see the shadow of a smirk on his face in the replay on TV. Yeah, there you go. yeah, just a little smirk. I don't even think it was a smirk just because Michael scored. I think it was a smirk because it was like, okay, this is what I've been trying to tell all these people about for months and months and months. When these guys are coming, we're going to be able to play the football I've been talking about in press conferences. We kind of saw it, in that first half. We saw the vision of what he wanted to do. And now he's kind of got and they're not done, obviously, in terms of improving the squad, but you saw what the ideas were around how Bob Bradley wants this team to play. And he talked about it in his post-game press conference.
Yeah, it's just quickly, just on the finish, like, wow. I don't think anyone knew that Michael Bradley had that in his repertoire. I mean, start this guy striker, I guess. He's Anthony Corey shout out. Waking the Red asked him if he was auditioning for the number 9 role for TFC moving forward. But no, for me, like, the goals were icing on the cake. For me, what Michael Bradley brought to that game was what we've been accustomed to Michael Bradley bringing to TFC in the past. And that was a destroyer in the midfield who would quickly won the ball back, who can get the ball to guys like Insigne, Mark Anthony Kaye, Jonathan Osorio, Bernardeschi, Jesus Jimenez, get balls to them at the right times, at the right moments, quickly. And that's what we see. He's such an important piece to this team when he's able to just play his role. It's no longer Michael Bradley who needs to be the guy to spray diagonal passes to get guys in behind. Michael Bradley doesn't need to do that anymore because you have guys like Jonathan Osorio and Lorenzo Insigne and Bernardeschi who can make those game-breaking passes. All Michael Bradley needs to do is get the ball to those guys, which is something he does so effectively. And yeah, Bob Bradley talked about that specifically, and he actually, and I wrote about it, is that he talked about Victor Vasquez and the comments that Victor Vasquez dropped about Michael Bradley after 2017. And that was when Victor Vasquez likened Michael Bradley to Busquets. And not saying that Michael Bradley is Sergio Busquets, but the type of player that he is, that's what he can be for TFC. He can be the guy who wins balls back. He can be the guy who connects passes in the midfield. Listen, Michael Bradley still led the team in touches and passes completed that game because the game still flows through Michael Bradley, but he's not making the final passes on most plays. Obviously Saturday was an anomaly, but he's not finishing off most plays. He's the guy who's kind of doing the dirty work in the middle of the park, and he is not being asked to do more than that. And that's so important to getting the best out of Michael Bradley.
And I think it saves his legs a little bit, right? Like that, to me, that was always kind of the concern of not that he's playing game in, game out, though I still maintain that he doesn't necessarily start every 90 minutes or go 90 minutes every single time. But the fact that he just had to carry so much of the weight of the team. Now he doesn't have to do that. Now he, as you say, can play his role, be the destroyer, win the ball back, pick off passes. That was the Michael Bradley we saw on Saturday is the Michael Bradley we're all used to from, say, 2014 to 2019, 20, if you want to add sort of that year in. And that is the Michael Bradley that, can play, can start every game, and again, doesn't have to go all 90, but that's the kind of guy that you need on a team, and hence why they still haven't found a replacement for him, because he still is that guy in a lot of ways.
Why wouldn't you want Michael Bradley to go 90 minutes, Mike, if you don't mind me asking?
It's not that I don't want Michael Bradley to go 90 minutes. Sometimes I don't think he needs to go 90 minutes every single match. Like I think he came out of one game early this year. But aside from that,
he's played all but 10 minutes this year.
Right.
But why?
Well, I think you just want to sometimes save it. Like, he is still, don't get me wrong, he is still a fantastic athlete. He is fit. He's probably still the fittest player on the team. But you kind of almost want to save those legs a little bit, right? For big matches, for things like that. Because there are times where he does look like he's out of gas a little bit. And maybe that goes to my earlier comment about the fact that he had to carry a lot in the first half of the year. Instead of just having to just do his role, he has to do all these extra things to cover for inexperienced players, for players out of position, things like that. That might save his legs a little bit. That's my reasoning and my thinking behind it.
And I think there was a time where we were hoping there was, within the ranks, there was the next somebody who could step up and step into that role. There was hope for Priso. There's been, and still, I guess, there's a hope for Okello to get that chance when healthy. But I think that was where, at least at one point during early part of the season and going into at least preseason, where we felt like, all right, do we need to rely on Michael to do that 90 week in, week out? Can we now start to transition to that next phase where we don't have to rely? But the problem is there is no one else to kind of really step in and kind of play that role. So he
Not
has
that way,
no. And so it's kind of like he's gonna, not that I'm complaining, because he's done a great, reality is he's probably just had to work harder than we need him to work. But when he doesn't have to, like a game like Saturday, if we can get that Michael Bradley week in, week out, not necessarily the goal scoring part, but just the overall component of what he does, I'm happy.
Yeah, I just think, usually you would, especially with the amount of congestion TFC have had, he's played, also not only has he played every 90 minutes except for the 10 minutes that he came off, he's played every Canadian Championship game 90 minutes. He's been asked to do an insane amount of work, but I also feel like he's getting better as the season has gone on. And that's the reason I asked. It's not like we're seeing Michael Bradley slow down at a certain point.
That's true.
And usually we're talking about a 34-year-old midfielder. So in most cases, Mike, you're bang on. Like, you kind of got to monitor those minutes. With Michael Bradley, like he's an anomaly here, which we have to appreciate because he's a guy who takes care of his, as we know, he's insane when it comes to his regimen of taking care of his body. I don't know if he's missed a training session this year either. Like this guy is a machine when it comes to ensuring that his body is ready and he's physically ready and he's so durable. It's not very often we see Michael Bradley need to take time off. So, hey, maybe I'll, have to eat my words later in the season because he's played so many minutes so far, but I don't see a problem with it at this point.
Well, no, I mean, as long as he is healthy, he will always be on the team sheet and he will play 90. I've accepted that. That's just how it's going to be, and that's completely fine. It's just, again, you always kind of think about like, can you, in a game where you're 4-0 up, can you give him a break, right? Like, but again, when he's playing the way he's playing, when you don't have a player that can kind of replicate a lot of the things that he does in that way, hard to take him off, and I can completely understand that. Want to wrap up this segment that went much longer than I had initially planned, but that is okay because the vibes are strong in this room, and this is what we want to talk about. So absolutely, that is okay. I'm going to say the P word, and then you give me a thought on it, and I'm going to give you some. I'm going to give you some numbers, and I'm going to give you some results from around. What's up, Mitch? Give you some numbers and give you some results, and then you tell me what you think. Playoffs? ?
No.
Why?
Not that they can't make the playoffs, but for me, it's all about building to next season, right? I want them to win as many games from here on out. Like I want them basically every game you go into, you want them to win, but I don't think that should be like we have to make the playoffs kind of focus. It's continue the growth, continue the development of some of these young guys playing alongside these more experienced players, win another Canadian championship tomorrow night, and the playoffs would be icing on the cake, right? But that to me, it's not my number one priority. It's a bonus.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm with you there, Sean, in the sense that anything that happens this season is consolation. There's 6 points back right now with 12 matches remaining. So it's not out of the question. But this team still needs to learn how to win away from home, win on the road. They haven't picked up a road win this season, which is pretty remarkable. There's also the teams that are in front of them. I believe there's about 5 teams in front of them before the final playoff spot. So 6 teams that are kind of maybe 7 teams if you throw Columbus into that mix, 8 if you throw Orlando into that mix. There's a lot of teams that are in congestion there, and they need to pass all those teams. But a lot of those teams will be playing each other for the next stretch of this season. Like if you look at the strength of schedule, TFC don't have an easy schedule the rest of the way. When you look at an Atlanta United schedule, you look at Cincinnati schedule, or you look at Chicago schedule, like comparing their schedules to those teams, like TFC have a tough path ahead of them. But I mean, if Saturday was any indication, let's just not rule it out just yet.
Well, I'm probably leaning to where both of you are as well. I'm probably leaning towards a no. However, I'm just going to throw this out here, and then everybody can make their own decisions on where they want to go. So you are right, Michael. Here are the teams that are above Toronto right now in the standings that are below the playoff line. Okay, so Atlanta, Miami, New England, who we play on Saturday, Chicago, Columbus, Charlotte, who we just beat. And then above the playoff line, who are sort of still in reaching distance, is Cincinnati, Columbus, and Orlando. All of those points, all those teams are within at the max 8 points. Okay. So that's Orlando and Columbus at 8. Atlanta is only 2 points, and you start to climb. So we still have a couple of these teams to play. Like I think we still have to play Miami. Obviously, we play New England. We just beat Charlotte. We've already beat Atlanta, right? We beat Chicago once this year. They beat us, obviously. But it's not out of the question. If you consider where Chicago was when we just played them a couple of weeks ago to where they are now, they just got on a little bit of a 3-match winning streak. They're 9th, and they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. They're only 2 points behind Cincinnati for the last playoff spot. So take that as it is. I'll also give you a couple of results from this weekend, and actually a couple of them went in our favor. If you want to start this kind of scoreboard watching, if you believe in that. Miami lost to NYCFC. Okay. Cincinnati drew against Nashville. Columbus drew against New England. Okay. Orlando lost to Philly. Obviously, we beat Charlotte. Let me just get the rest of the results here. Just bear with me for a second. I think those are the main ones we're going to need to take a look at. Probably Atlanta. Chicago won. They beat Vancouver, but Atlanta lost to the Galaxy. So Greg Vanney, shout out Greg Vanney, doing us a bit of a favor there. So you're obviously going to need some teams to start dropping results, and then you need to start picking up results to make that move. Mike, to your point, the team needs to learn how to win on the road, because the majority of the rest of their games going through the remainder of the season are going to be on the road. So they're going to have to go and learn and pick up some valuable points on the road, preferably 3, not 1. There's very little margin of error there for them to stay in it.
That's the thing.
There's a crack. There's a little bit of light and there's a crack.
I mean,
How
there's very
realistic
little
it is
margin.
to bust it open, we'll see.
Yeah, there's very little margin for error, but like I mentioned, a lot of those teams that are ahead of Toronto, they play one another quite a few times. So some of them are going to naturally pick up points. That makes the margin for error even smaller. You have to hope that the results kind of cross each other out and cancel each other out, or draws. Big draw fans here on Toronto Till I Die.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be the crack in the wall. There's a little bit of light. Let's see if they can bust it in. I mean, look,
it can happen.
Well, put it this way: Toronto FC in 2019 were in a similar position. They weren't as far back, but they did go 13 unbeaten to end the year, made the playoffs. Different scenario, I understand that, but in a lot of ways it isn't, because they ended up getting a few players. The main one being Omar Gonzalez and Nico Benezet. And they made a mirage run to the MLS Cup final. I'm not saying that's happening now. Probably will not. But it might be.
Saying there's a chance.
They're saying there's a chance. We're saying there's a chance. All right, guys. Let's move on here. Let's get into the Michael Singh notebook here. We're running a little bit longer, but that was a great conversation. Thanks, everybody who were throwing comments into the live comments. That was awesome to read those. Michael, I just want to get an idea of just the press box on Saturday, because I think, when we think press boxes, they're supposed to be impartial, very, very objective in the way that they see a game. What was it like to be in that press box? First of all, just how many people were in that press box? I bet you there were a lot more than there have been in the first half of the season.
Yeah, definitely the busiest press box of the year. But yeah, like in outside in the stadium, there was a buzz. Like everyone was talking about it before the game. What are these guys going to look like? So and so. I remember when Michael scored that 4th goal, I'm sitting beside Josh Cloak, and me and him just like stare at each other, be like, "What did we? Are we sure we just witnessed that? Did that actually just happen?" Yeah, I mean, look, when TFC's winning. And winning in this style, this excitement, it's also great for the coverage of the team, because a lot more people care about this team when they're winning. Let's face it. When they're going through tough times and a rebuild and what they went through the first half of the year, not as many people care. So I think, yeah, naturally there was a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement, and we'll see kind of what that 4-0 result, hopefully some results this week, what that kind of leads into through the second half of the year.
Right, perfect. One of the things that Bob Bradley mentioned in his post-game press conference, and you kind of alluded to earlier when we were talking about Daniil didn't really sort of hamper any plans for more additions? We get that question every week, every show, in terms of who's coming in this transfer window. So what could some of those additions potentially look like? Are they, again, intra-league? Is it outside the league? What could those potential additions look like on top of the ones already made?
Give me 1 second. Stall for 30 seconds for me, Mike.
Yeah, no worries. I think there was it's just an interesting comment from Bob, right? Because the question was, and I think a lot of people have been asking this week, just this idea around, all right, well, you bring in Daniil and he's not the answer defensively. He's going to be a piece, not the final product. So what is the end game here in terms of the back? Because I think a lot of people feel like that's the missing piece. You've addressed a piece in the midfield with Marc-Anthony Kaye. You've obviously addressed the attack with Bernardeschi and Insigne. Now what does that defensive core look like? And I think that is sort of what a lot of TFC fans have on their mind. And they're kind of wondering, okay, if kind of got their ears perked up once they said, well, Daniil's not the last piece. What does that look like?
Great. Perfect timing. I was just tweeting out that Michael Bradley was just named the Major League Soccer Player of the Week.
Hey, the vote campaign worked. Good job, guys. Stuff those ballots.
That's right.
First time that's happened to a TFC player since Richie Larea in week 14 of 2020. So that part is very exciting and good to have a TFC player recognized, especially Michael Bradley, who not very often you're going to see him as named as a player of the week just based on the position that he plays. Circling back to your initial question there, Mike, about Bob Bradley's comments. Yeah, that part is, again, that further highlights how much of a no-brainer the Doniel Henry signing was for this team, for both parties. I think that's great. As for what TFC are going to do moving forward, I mean, whoever they bring in, I believe they want to be part of this core moving forward. Actually, that's not necessarily true. There's two sides of this. There's this next week and a half could be defining in terms of the direction that they go. If TFC remain in contention, they might go out and just acquire a player on loan for the second half of the season, the second half push. The other half is maybe they get a player who is who's going to be here for years to come. So I know what they want is someone who's gonna impact this team in one way or another, whether it is the playoff push this year or a long-term piece. But yeah, there's still room for them to make a move, which I think is just great.
Well, and this is sort of the confusing thing I think some people were asking about is how much sort of tam space does the team have still, right? Given the signings that they've made so far, what does that kind of look like for them?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't have an answer for how much exact space that the team has. I just know that they have space to make at least one more addition. And the good part about, this summer transfer window is when you bring in a player, let's say his salary is $400K, it only counts as $200K against the cap. So they have a little bit of wiggle room there to perhaps make an addition to this team. And you look at the positions on the field, obviously center back is still a place that this team needs to improve. We talked about their depth early on, and I think that's a no-brainer that they need to improve that depth and bring in probably a starting quality center back. And also right back, I think, is a position this team can improve. So yeah, keep an eye on, I'd say, one of those two positions if TFC do decide to pull the trigger this summer.
All right, awesome. And then sort of one question that's been out there that keeps reoccurring, so I kind of amalgamated into sort of just one overall question, is just that this sort of free agent situation with TFC, with the MLSPA releasing sort of the players that would be available or eligible for free agency in the off season. The likes of Bono, Oso, Westberg, Mavinga, those names we kind of knew about already.
Mhm.
We also knew about this is the final year of Michael Bradley's deal, but he was not on that list, and I think that confused some people out there. Don't know if this is something you can answer or no, but why would he not be included on that MLSPA potential free agent list?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. It's something we've actually been inquiring about. We've yet to hear back about that. So, not sure if he had an option that was already done. I'm not sure if he re-signed, or I'm not sure if it's just like a clerical error from the MLSPA, because those lists are not always the most accurate. Especially if also the salary figures that are released sometimes also aren't the most accurate, I've been told. So, I mean, it's not the official free agency list. So, I wouldn't say read too much into that. In terms of his contract, yeah, I've spoken to Michael about this, and like he's going to return to Toronto FC. It's going to be a team friendly deal. He told me flat out it's never been about money for him. And he actually mentioned that people laughed at him the first time he said that, but obviously he left money on the table his last deal to give TFC a DP spot, and I imagine he'll do the same moving forward with his next contract. And this is a guy who obviously wears TFC on his sleeve and is going to be a member of TFC for a very long time, whether it be as a player or in a capacity beyond a player. So yeah, I'm not too worried about Michael Bradley's upcoming free agency status.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question for both of you, and John, I'd love to get your thought about this. The sort of second half of that question was just around, of the free agents that's out there, who's the one that comes back or should come back on a deal? To me, it's obvious it should be Osorio, but who knows what I'm not getting into the whole DP thing. I know I made that comment a couple weeks ago. Everybody just jumped all over me. Though I did have some of the defenders out there, so thank you for those who.
Hey,
who
great content, up. Mike.
It's great content, absolutely. But who do you think out of are there any of the free agents that you'd be like, yeah, okay, we got to bring that player back?
Have to or want are two different things.
Fair enough. Okay, let's say want to.
Okay, then that's also. I want to bring him back for sure, right? Not at an overpriced amount. I want to, pay the man his fair due. But yeah, I want him back. I just think.
What's an overpriced amount for you, Sean?
Well,
that's you know what we already know he's making at least $1 something right now. So I'm not willing to. I don't think he should get a pay cut. A little raise, bump him up, add some incentives, right? Like you want him to continue with the hunger and that desire, and sometimes I think the best way is if you can do incentive based, where they have to kind of they want the money, all right, they're going to earn that money.
Right, but isn't he already close to the max TAM anyway?
Look,
he's about 400K below it, 500K below it.
So then, like I said, give him the max you can without giving him that word.
Okay. I know how Michael feels about this, so I don't need to go through that again. It'll be interesting because he might have a case to be like, I'm probably worth more than a $400,000 bump, and at that point, you got to make a decision whether you keep him or not.
Well, I mean, it's more
matter 600, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, so 600. But he may say, I'm worth more than that.
And he may feel he honestly is, but the market will prove whether that's fact or fiction. And I mean, there's probably a team in the league that would pay him that bump, right?
Don't say it.
So I'm not going to say I want to see it happen, and I don't see him really. For me, it's if he's staying in MLS, it's with our club. But like I said, it all depends on what he feels he's worth.
Okay. My thoughts on this are clear, so I'm not going to go any further than that. All right. Let's close out the show, guys, with 3 burning questions this week. These come in from the #TFC Live community. So let's go. First one. This is amalgamation of, again, questions. A lot of people were asking this in regards to the Canadian Championship final, which is tomorrow at 10:30. Just a program note for the Tunnel Club. We will be doing a pregame show for that. We'll figure out the start time and let you guys know online. But how would you, or how should Bob Bradley deploy Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi tomorrow in the Cup final? And I think that question is more in the context of, should they both start? Should one be on the bench and one start? What ideally do you think should be the way to manage, especially as Bob Bradley kind of said in his post game, right? These guys are kind of at the beginning of their preseason, right? So they're not fully like 90 minutes match fit yet.
I think you start both of them, and I think you start the same way that the team started against Charlotte if O'Neill and Mark Anthony Kaye are fit and good to go. I think that way you have a better grip on how exactly you can sort of manage their minutes, because if for whatever reason, I think there's extra time. So if it does go to extra time, then you're not taking that risk.
I think we'll go straight to penalties. No, didn't it go to penalties last year?
Penalties?
So far, every game's gone straight to penalties.
I think it goes straight to penalties.
Oh, okay. Well, that changes things then.
Yeah, because the game in Hamilton went straight to penalties.
Yeah. So, I think then that changes things. Absolutely. Bring them off the bench, start the second half, and kind of see where the team goes from there.
Okay, so you're don't start them, bring them on in the second half.
If there's no extra time, yes.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Sean, what do you think?
If you're playing that scenario, do you want to playing coming back, or do you want to just finish the game as early as you can, where you can afford to just rest them and not have them try to, I think there's more physical pressure on them coming in second half if we're, say, down 1 or 2, right? Because then they're going to feel the need that they have to perform. We have to, versus you start with that, your stronger 11, they come out, you get a lead, maybe you're up 2 or 3. Not saying the same thing as what we saw on Saturday, but you know what I mean? You have that confidence. You kind of want to it's like you just build off of that confidence of that starting 11 playing together. And versus, to me, you have to start at least 1, if not 2.
That's fair, and I see where you're coming from there, and you're not wrong, because there is no right or wrong here. We're not going to know how this game plays out. What I'll say is that this team went to Vancouver already this season. Honestly, TFC's second team went to Vancouver, and outplayed the heck out of the Whitecaps, and should have came away with a victory if they weren't robbed by the official. So I'm not afraid of the Vancouver Whitecaps, even if Bernardeschi or Insigne aren't on the pitch to start the game. That's my only kind of reservation there. But again, I take your point, and it's completely valid.
Yeah, I think the situation is a little bit different than back in I think it was May we were there. Just simply because, again, it's a cup final. They're going to be up for it. They just lost against Chicago, and I think rested some players who would normally play. And I think also, I think you start both. And look, Mike, I think your point is 100% valid in terms of how you're thinking about it. But I think, why ruin the vibe of what you kind of already started to build in terms of the chemistry of the players that started that first half on Saturday, right? Continue to grow that, and try to put this game away as early as possible. And that point, if you do need to rest an Insigne, get him off the turf and make sure that calf doesn't get aggravated on that turf, and you can take him off earlier. Great. What I think is going to happen is one starts and one sits. So I think Bernardeschi starts and maybe Insigne sits, and then they're going to assess where they're at, maybe at halftime. And then if they need to bring him in, they bring him in, right? I think that's where they go. But if you have an opportunity to start both and you can put Vancouver on the back foot right away and bag 2 goals in the first half and make it a little bit more comfortable for yourself, then why not? This is a game they need to win, right? They want to go to Champions League. They want their shiny new toys to go to Champions League. So try to win this thing as early as possible. You got to get back and get on a flight to Boston for the weekend. So put it to bed early,
On turf
kind of
again.
like they did on the weekend. That would be perfect.
By the way,
Yeah, turf again.
Exactly, right? So they're going to have to play on turf at some point. Okay, so we're going on to the next question. Which TFC player will get the most benefit, increase skill level, their ceiling, football IQ, etc., playing long-term with Lorenzo and Federico? This comes from Giancarlo. So I'm assuming he's talking about young players.
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, I mean, there's a lot that are definitely going to benefit from that. Jesus Jimenez, of course, would be one of the main ones, just based on the position that he plays in the starting role. But if you're talking about young players, there's 2 for me that stand out right off. Oh man, there's a lot. So yeah, Kosi was the one that just popped to mind because he had a fantastic game over the weekend, and obviously having Bernardeschi right there as an outlet helps.
Interesting that he's the young player that kept his spot. Now, obviously, the right back position being what it is, but it's interesting that he kept his spot.
Yeah, I think that's more so to do with the position at the right back. And another one that's obviously going to benefit a lot is Io, because, I mean, the Jesus Jimenez reason he plays striker, and lining up in between those guys is mouth-watering. And Io makes a lot of good runs. He hasn't really got a lot of good service over the last 2-3 seasons. So just having those guys, I mean, we've seen Io when he plays with Pozuelo and he can get slipped through. We haven't seen Io play with really good wingers yet. So I know Io's a guy who loves making runs on the shoulders of defenders and kind of getting in front of defenders. Let's see what that looks like now with players who can whip in a ball into the box on a consistent basis. I think that part's really exciting. And then, of course, Jaden Nelson. Watching Lorenzo Insigne day in, day out at training, we all know Jaden Nelson's decision-making in the final third leaves a lot to be desired. But watching Lorenzo now on a daily basis and see what he does when he gets into those positions, I think that part is going to do well for his game. And I thought Jaden Nelson was a bright spot when he came off the bench. And I think maybe it's a little bit of a fire under him now that his spot isn't guaranteed into the squad. I know there has been European interest in Nelson, but I also think that Bob Bradley wants to keep him because he sees him as part of this future and sees the potential that this kid has.
Absolutely. Sean?
I'd probably have to say the same 3 in that same order, just based on, what we saw at Kosi on Saturday was, like a motivated young man. Like he seemed eager to show that, I think he wanted to impress the new guys, show that, he's young, but he can play and he can play alongside them. And then you're right, when it'll be interesting to see what Io can do with, getting the kind of service from those type of wingers. And then you can only hope Jaden's gonna, this can help him get to that next level, right? Because we know the raw talent that's there, but now it's tweaking it, knowing when to attack the wing, when to hold up, when to, just the little things, right? That it's the intangibles that often you can't actually just, a coach can't teach. It's having, playing alongside higher IQ soccer players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll add for mine Luca Petrasso. I think he'll learn a lot with Criscito at that left back position, and then obviously we've already talked about Insigne in terms of when he plays up in the wing, but I think he'll learn a lot from Criscito defensively because I do think Petrasso's long-term future could be as a left back. And if he can learn from Criscito and learn about positioning and again sort of the things we talked about earlier in the show, then I think Luca Protesto has a bright future in football, whether it's with TFC long term or it's somewhere else. But that I think is where that's the one player that I would actually think could really learn a lot and really sort of blossom under somebody like Criscito. All right, and last a burning question of the week. This was an interesting one. That's why I picked this one, because I didn't really consider it or even think about this player until this question came up. But this comes from Danny. Has there been any consideration about recalling Aro Jr. from loan? He's of course on loan in Brazil at Santos. Is apparently not playing that much at Santos. So Danny's wondering, would we consider bringing Aro back for a little run before, I think his contract's up at the end of the year.
Unless something has drastically changed, no. Or TFC are really desperate, no. Aro made his bed with some of his actions over the past year and a half, and TFC decided to move on, and I don't think they want to head back into that direction. So no, I don't believe so.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, Aro was fine as a right back. I like right now. Do I say you take him out and you put him in the team and they're significantly better than they are now? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and his move away was not about his ability to play on the pitch or family reasons or anything like that. Like his move away from the team was. I mean, I've talked about it before on this show. He made his bed. Like he did what he, chose to be as professional as he did over the last couple seasons with TFC, and that's not where TFC want to get back to. Is that level of professionalism? So they decided to move on.
That's that. All right. We'll wrap the show up today. Thank you everybody for listening and tuning in. It was a bit of a longer show, but I mean, hey, when you win 4-0 with 2 new DPs and the atmosphere that was in BMO Field on Saturday, you got to talk about it and talk about it in depth. Just a couple of programming notes. Like I said a little bit earlier, Sean and I will be back with the Tunnel Club on Twitter Spaces. That will be tomorrow, but we'll be doing a pregame show, not a postgame show. I don't think you want to be hearing from us at like 1 a.m. So we'll do a little pregame show. We'll figure out the starting time, and then we will post that through the Tunnel Club Twitter page. Toronto Till I Die will be back again next Monday, 3 p.m. as always. So if you have burning questions for next week's show, please send those in. We'll send out a post. But other than that, gents, anything else you want to sort of get out there before we wrap up tonight's show?
Just quickly, like, man, the support with this podcast has been incredible. Obviously, TFC Tunnel Club, what you guys do is fantastic, and I think a lot of people appreciate it. If any listeners out there are listening via podcast, if you guys can just do us a favor and just leave a review, I think that would go a long way. And yeah, I mean, like I said, the direction that this is heading and the direction the team is heading, it's exciting, and we're having a lot of fun doing this. So we appreciate everyone's comments, everyone chiming in, and everyone's support. It truly does mean a lot to all of us. I know I'm speaking on behalf of Jeff too when I say that. So thank you guys.
Yep, Jeff, all the way in North Bay, if you're listening, buddy. A lot of bug spray. Don't get eaten by those flies. It's long production nights for Jeff up there in North Bay. We're looking forward to having him back soon. Okay, so on behalf of Michael Singh and Sean Levy, I'm Mike Newell. Thanks for listening to Toronto Till I Die. Like, rate, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll talk to you next week. From that, take care, guys.
Have a good one.
And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.